Help us recognize the champions in our communities. Submit your nominations by visiting kvnutalk.com. The Above and Beyond Salute, sponsored by Firehouse Subs.
KVNU News Time is 5:05. I'm Bill Walter with this news update brought to you by Logan Extermination. An employee of a St. George Maverick gas station was arrested after police said he was caught filming an underage girl in the shop's restroom. Officers with St. George Police said they were dispatched to the Maverick shortly after 5 p.m. Friday on a report issued by a 17-year-old girl stating that she had been using the convenience store's bathroom when she noticed someone was recording her on a phone. The girl reportedly told police she noticed an iPhone placed under the back of the stall to the right of her as she was using the toilet with the camera lens facing towards her. The girl then grabbed the phone from the suspect, later identified as 21-year-old Lucas Gorglione, and deleted the video. Gorglione did not react. According to police records, the girl feared that Gorglione was waiting for her to exit, so she made the call to police from the bathroom stall. KVNU News Time is 5:06. KVNU weather for tonight, partly cloudy, patchy fog after midnight, low in the low 30s, sunny and warmer, and upper 50s for the high on Wednesday. Thursday, partly cloudy skies, high temperature in the lower 60s. It's been to 45. That's what it is right now, 45 degrees at KVNU. KVNU weather brought to you by Adams Wealth Advisors. They put clients first under any circumstance. You'll receive peace of mind with Adams Wealth Advisors. Schedule a time with an advisor today. Visit AdamsWealthAdvisors.com.
With this incredibly cold and wet winter, it's put everybody behind on lawn care services. Logan Extermination is ready to serve you. They offer the following services: outside bug spray from April to October for $65 per spray. Spray for weeds in your lawn as soon as possible for only $45 per 5,000 square feet. Don't forget, Logan Extermination can aerate your lawn to get airflow to combat the extra snow and moisture. Call Logan Extermination today. Logan Extermination, 752-8450.
KVNU News Time is 5:07. While they may not have cured Alzheimer's, a team at BYU has discovered something so effective that one day humans may never suffer the effects of the degenerative disease. BYU PhD student Chad Pollard earned the Innovator of the Year award at the school for spearheading the research and says they can now detect Alzheimer's disease 10 to 15 years before current standard tests. Dr. Tim Jenkins is Pollard's mentor at BYU and co-founder of the technology. Once the first hint of Alzheimer's is detected, treatments can slow the disease progression to the point where a person could live symptomatic-free for the rest of their life. Jenkins explained that once the disease is identified, you can apply a therapeutic that would then decrease that to such a low level that it's never going to be impactful to the individual's lifestyle or to the individual themselves. And a video shared on social media showing multiple Ogden police officers striking a man who appeared to be pinned down on the ground has the man's mother upset. While the Ogden Police Department has not identified the man in the video at this time, Marcia Quintana says that the man is her 30-year-old son, Sean Sims. Quintana tells Fox 13 she was unaware her son was behind bars in the Weber County Jail until he called her. She said that Sims told her he had been beaten, and there was a video taken of the incident. Quintana says her son could have been jaywalking, was intoxicated, and on drugs at the time of the incident, which took place on the side of Washington Boulevard near 18th Street in Ogden Saturday night. Regardless, she says it does not justify what she saw in the video. On Sunday, the Ogden Police Department put out a statement saying they were aware of a use of force involving other officers, or their officers, rather. They said that prior to the video being released, they had started an after-action use of force investigation. Quintana says after watching the video, she has since obtained an attorney. KVNU News Time is 5:10. For more details on these and other stories, visit CacheValleyDaily.com.
Flowers are the perfect way to say Happy Secretary's Day.
Oh, wait, that's wrong. What are we calling it now?
Administrative Assistance Day, I think.
I've seen Admin's Day.
What about Executive Admin's Day?
Barbara says it's Administrative Professionals Day.
Who's Barbara?
My administrative professional.
We have a winner.
Call Plant Peddler Floral and show appreciation to your secretary, administrative professional. Call 753-0444. They'll deliver a beautiful floral arrangement. Plant Peddler Floral, 753-0444.
I see you finally got a new helmet.
I did. Bought it cheap online. Follow me. We'll turn off here.
I'm right behind you.
Watch the cars. They can be crazy.
Teddy! No! Are you okay? Somebody do something!
Was this young man hit by a car?
Yes, and his helmet is smashed.
It's a brand new helmet.
It's probably a fake. Fakes cause real harm. You're smart, buy smart. Brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Did you know that the coronavirus can damage the inner ear, leading to chronic dizziness and tinnitus, which is a constant ringing or buzzing noise? But there's hope. For help and more information, call 800-837-8428 or visit liferebalanced.org and discover a life rebalanced. That's 800-837-8428 or liferebalanced.org. Sponsored by the Vestibular Disorders Association.
Feels like Tuesday. Tuesday has no feel.
Early. Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Logan City is going to be celebrating a new park. This is the May Swenson Park. And for those not familiar with the name, May Swenson is a nationally recognized poet and a graduate of Utah State University. And so there's a kind of a joint effort to honor her and bring this park into the spotlight as it opens tomorrow here in Cache Valley. With the details, here's Craig.
It's the opening of USU Swenson Park. It's a space to honor the legacy of American poet and USU alum May Swenson. This park is being built at 669 East, 500 North. It's just below the campus on the site of the original Swenson family home, by the way. Paul Crumbly is an emeritus professor at USU. He joins us. From what I read about this, Paul, I get the sense that you have probably been a part of the planning of this project almost from the start.
Almost. I was asked to have a role when the College of Humanities and Social Sciences decided it was going to try and do something with the parcel of land that was attached to the original house purchased in 1975.
Yeah, it goes back that far. Okay. It's gone through...
But my personal involvement began with this. What's now resulting and culminated with Swenson Park began in the spring of 2015.
Oh, I see. Okay. Because I'm told the house was demolished long ago, and then they were talking about building a new house there, and then that didn't happen, I guess. How did that go?
No, that was actually moving along quite well. The project was initiated under Dean Allen, and then Dean Ward came in and wanted to make constructing something to honor the family a priority, and he decided to build on the idea of a Swenson house on that property that could be used for all kinds of events. It would be sort of a bridge between the campus and the larger community. And all that went along pretty swimmingly. There was widespread family involvement. But in 2019, when they sent the project out for bid, their property construction prices had at that moment just skyrocketed. And they had to abandon the project.
So now it's going to be a park?
It's going to be a park. The people who originally donated to the house, for the most part, were patient and willing to see what the university would propose. And a park seemed a natural next step. In many ways, a park is easier to manage because you don't have to worry so much about maintenance and hiring people to oversee and manage the facility. So a park becomes a sort of more open space. The lot where the Swenson House stood has been a pathway that for years students have used to get from the neighboring community onto campus. So it was a way of sort of taking that pathway and constructing a park, the hope being that it would be part of the student experience, those who were walking through there anyway, and also it would add to the community by creating a kind of pocket park, in addition to honoring May Swenson and her family.
Yes. Well, at the end of this interview, we're going to go through the details of the event next week so people can make plans to be there. From this point on, I would like you to talk about May and her poetry. What would you say it is about her poetry that has led to such a following that she has? She's kind of a giant in this whole space. Am I right on that?
You are right. The critic Harold Bloom says that she's one of the top 12 American poets, and he's going back to Whitman and Dickinson, but refers to her also as underappreciated. And I think that's fair. She has one of the reasons that she has attracted the kind of interest that she has is that she was raised here, as you know, went to Logan High, attended Utah State, graduated in 34, set out for New York in 36, and that was still Depression. And she was determined to make a life for herself as a poet and to break into the New York art scene. But she struggled. At one point in 1938, she was down to her last 18 cents. But she continued to apply herself, find jobs where she could, attend writers' workshops where that was possible. And her first real breakthrough publication came in 1949. So all that's a way of saying that she was scrappy, and she had to work her way up from the very bottom of the art world in New York. She lived initially in Greenwich Village in different houses and apartments. But after that breakthrough in 49 with the Saturday Review of Literature, she gained a degree of prominence because that was a national publication. And then I think it was 1952 or thereabouts when she published her first poem with the New Yorker. She would go on to publish around 70 poems with the New Yorker, which is quite a few. But she was seen as a kind of a poet's poet in the sense that she was not a member of any school of thought. She was not allied with any particular group of poets. She defined herself as an experimental poet. And so because of that, because of the experimental nature of her work, she spoke to a number of different audiences. She was interested in space flight and science, for instance. She was also famous and continues to be famous for her love poems, and that appealed to a particular population as well. A number of those poems are early expressions of sort of same-sex lesbian affection, and that spoke to a certain segment of the American reading public. But she also was very sort of cagey in the way she constructed love poems. She used a lot of heterosexual tropes that didn't alienate heterosexual readers. Her sister Margaret used to talk about how after May's death, when the first posthumous edition of her love poems came out, people she knew were buying the volume on Valentine's Day to give either to their husband or wife in male-female, heterosexual marriages.
Oh, wow. Well, so through those lean years, is it fair to say, and I don't know if this is even how it works in poetry, but was she finding her style or perfecting this style, or is that a way to put it?
I think that is a way to put it, but it might even be more accurate to say that she was figuring out who she was as a poet. That is, she was coming into herself. And I think that's the focus in some senses on self-discovery more than the writing that goes down on the page. She describes her writing process at some length in a wonderful essay called A Poem Happens to Me. And for her, poetry was something that she was suddenly overwhelmed by, that she would feel suddenly compelled to write. And she first realized she was writing poetry in her 12th or 13th year when, examining a page from her diary, her cousin, Sonny, said to her, this is poetry. This stuff scams that you're writing. So she hadn't deliberately decided to be a poet. That is, she hadn't been educated and introduced to poetry when she started writing it. And so there was that sense that she was writing sort of for herself from the beginning, and writing as a response to different kinds of inspiration. And when she got to New York and began to achieve a degree of prominence, and people were wondering, how to classify what she was doing, she began to resist the idea that she was following in the footsteps of other poets, like Elizabeth Bishop. She was being compared to Elizabeth Bishop, and she still is being compared to Elizabeth Bishop, but also Marianne Moore and Emily Dickinson. But she bristled at those efforts to situate her in a strict line of descent. And she developed a sense of herself as a poet who had no allegiances, really, other than to self-expression. And she began to define herself as a poet who didn't have a clear historical context for what she was doing, in a way. There was a spontaneity to her poems that she wanted to sustain. And so her identity was as a kind of poetry outsider. And she sort of polished and refined that identity over time, insisting at different points that in her early life she'd been educated at what she referred to as a cow college. And at different times she would insist that she didn't have a thorough education in literature and in poetry. And she began to treat that as a kind of badge of honor, to say that she wasn't subject to the pressures that had come with being part of a movement or aligning yourself with a set of clear precursors, if that makes any sense to you.
Sure. That's interesting. We're talking to Paul Crumbly, Emeritus Professor at USU, about an upcoming event next week. We're talking about the park that is being built there just below the college to honor May Swenson. And we talked before we went on the air, Paul, and you told me you're writing a book, and now I see, after all you just said there, why you're considering, I guess it's maybe a subtitle, The Wild Space of Things Becoming.
Right.
That's just like her whole putting together what she did.
Yeah. No, that's why I chose that title, and it's particularly applicable because that title comes from the first sentence or two of an essay she wrote titled "The Poet as Anti-Specialist."
It's amazing. Obviously, she's a talented poet. Would you call her a prolific poet?
Yes. In the collected poems of May Swenson, published by the Library of America, edited by Langan Hammer, that came out in 2013, there were over 500 poems. Mm-hmm. She had a wonderful extended correspondence with the poet Elizabeth Bishop. And Elizabeth Bishop was famously slow, careful, meticulous in her own composition. And when they corresponded back and forth, I think at one point, about 1958, they really met at Yaddo, a poet's workshop in upstate New York in 1950. And their relationship developed through a correspondence. And May was sending poems to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth at one point says, experimentation is fine, but at some point you simply have to draw the line. You have to stop. And May's position was the opposite. She said, no. She said, I don't have the kind of control that would allow me, to turn off the poetry spigot. And that wasn't what she wanted to do. She wanted to be a kind of open conduit for inspiration and poems that could take different shapes and address different subjects and acquire a kind of life of their own on the page.
So she wasn't maybe as slow and meticulous as Elizabeth Bishop was.
Oh, no. In the collected works of hers, that there are over 500 poems. Elizabeth Bishop, for instance, is really famous for about 100 poems. And they are beautiful poems. Elizabeth Bishop is a fabulous poet. But Swenson was, particularly when compared to Bishop, prolific. And she wrote all the time. She wrote almost, she took her diary, kept a diary, and had a writing notebook. And she saw everything as a potential subject for a poem. And she's got a great poem called Any Object, where she talks about how any object before the eye can expand to embrace eternity. And that was sort of, I guess that sort of explains part of what she did. She saw things as interconnected. And she was sort of a poetry of evolution, in the sense that she felt like natural selection is taking place continuously, and we're part of it. And that's part of what her work as a poetry was doing, was to clarify the relationship of the creative mind to the ongoing process of creation, and to be part of that, to the extent that doing so is possible. And I think her composition process, where she was open to the reception of inspiration, made her a more responsive conduit. I guess if you were to contrast her with Elizabeth Bishop, you would say Elizabeth Bishop was selective about what she did in opposition to Swenson, who was receptive as opposed to selective.
Yeah.
But she was a poet who openly embraced the entire universe that surrounded her and celebrated all of its many manifestations, including not just space flight, but same-sex love.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got to get to your details on the event next week. One other thing before we do that. How is it that Washington University of St. Louis houses most of her documents and original manuscripts?
That is because she gave readings at Washington University and became very good friends with Mona Van Dyne, who was the campus poet at that time. Washington University was beginning to build a collection of modern literature, including poetry. And Mona Van Dyne approached May Swenson and asked if there was a way that they could be the place in their special collections in Olin Library, if they could be the place where May would house her papers. And so it was largely due to her influence. Utah State, this was in the 1960s. Utah State also expressed an interest, but it didn't go very far. For one thing, they were late. They didn't approach her until, I think, a decade later. But by then, she had already made a commitment to Washington University. And so hers is one of the larger archival collections there at Washington University, but there are a number of other poets there as well, notably James Merrill, for instance.
All right. So the event, tell us what will happen there and when it starts and so forth.
It starts at 1. It will take place in the park. There will be a tent. Because our weather's so unpredictable, there will be, the program consists of, I think, a welcome by Joe Ward, the dean, the president of the university, Noel Cockett, will make some brief remarks. Chris Iyer will be on the program, and he will reflect, I think, on the significance of the park for the family. I will make a few brief remarks after Chris, and I'll talk a little bit about the Swenson, how May fits in, I suppose, to the Swenson family. I'll be talking about her sort of Utah roots that she maintained as she moved on to New York. Following that, Katie Coles, past poet laureate of Utah and poet at the University of Utah, will talk about Swenson's legacy in the world of poetry. And it will conclude with a group of students who will collectively read the poem, May Swenson's poem, Earth, Your Dancing Place. And the final event will be a ribbon cutting for the park. I should mention here, Craig, even though May Swenson is very prominent in all of this discussion, the family wanted us to honor the family as a whole. and to honor in particularly Dan, Arthur, and Margaret, May's parents. And Dan, as you may know, worked for 40 years at Utah State in the mechanical arts program. He was a woodworker. So that's important, I think, to bear in mind that May Swenson, when we think of Swensons up here in Utah, we think of May first, but she was part of a sprawling family with who have an interesting history of their own. Both parents were born in Sweden and converted to Mormonism, and came to Zion in order to live more fully a life founded on their beliefs.
I read somewhere they spoke Swedish in their home. English was the second language.
That's right. And the story goes that May spoke Swedish until she began grade school.
Wow.
And I think that was truly the case. There were 10 kids in all. One, Lloyd, died in infancy. But as the family expanded, I think it became more difficult to confine the language spoken in the house to Swedish. so English gradually worked its way in. But I think initially that's very much the case, that May grew up fluent in Swedish, and that's one of the reasons why she translated poems from Swedish to
yes,
English.
I read that. So the event is Wednesday, April 26th, 1 o'clock, and it's at 669 East 500 North.
That's right.
And you've given us all the other details, I believe. And so, Paul, really appreciate you taking some time to do this. And for all of you involved in organizing this, it's really a wonderful tribute to May, and as you said, her family, and we hope those who have the interest will be there. It could be quite a crowd, but it sounds like you're ready for them.
We're ready for them. We hope that the weather is supportive.
Thank you, Craig. And very cool thing to have this open up. If you want to learn more about Swenson, USU, as mentioned there in the interview, has a whole slew of archives. What a story, really. Thanks again to Craig for the interview. Please stay tuned on the other side. Sad news, the news of the passing of former Logan City Mayor Darla Clark. A couple of stories that Darla said I could tell once she was no longer with us, and she promised me that I would. That's coming up after these headlines with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KVNU News Time is 5:38, and the news is brought to you by U&I Furniture. The First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has announced additional details regarding the groundbreaking for the Montpelier, Idaho Temple. Additionally, an artist's rendering of the temple has also been released. The groundbreaking ceremony will take place on June 17th. Ryan K. Olson, a member of the church's General Authority 70, will preside. Attendance at the groundbreaking, invitation only. Live broadcast of the event will be available for the more than 15,000 church members in the area. The Montpelier, Idaho Temple was announced in April 2022 by Church President Russell M. Nelson. It will be built on a 2.6-acre site located on the northeast corner of Washington and 6th Street in Montpelier. The artist's rendering of the temple, released Monday, showed a two-story structure with a single spire. The granite building will have arching doorways and windows. Congress allocated billions of dollars through the bipartisan infrastructure law to plug up orphaned well sites across the country, with Utah being one of the first states to receive the help. But President of Conservatives for Responsible Stewardship, Dave Jenkins, says lawmakers should be doing more to hold bad actors accountable. According to the Utah Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining's website, A reported 46 orphan wells in the state are not plugged and are abandoned, scattered on private, state, and federal lands. Jenkins claims that number is a lot higher, closer to 1,000. He says the discrepancy is due to when federal or state agencies declare oil wells orphaned.
Some of them may not be put in that orphan well bucket by the state yet, or a lot of them, but because they're idle and non-producing and haven't produced oil for many years, they're sitting there dotting the landscape and nobody's plugging them or cleaning them up.
Jenkins says time is money and adds that owners and operators in Utah, such as Westar Exploration, have played the system by extracting profits while offloading well cleanup costs to taxpayers. Jenkins says the Bureau of Land Management across Republican and Democratic administrations has dropped the ball for wells on federal lands, as has the state for sites on private and state lands. And the Tax Foundation has released its 2023 State Business Tax Climate Index, which measures how well states structure their tax systems to encourage economic growth. The report ranks Wyoming as the best state for business tax climate, followed by Utah at 8th and Idaho at 15th. Other Intermountain states, including Montana and Nevada, also scored well. The report serves as a useful tool for businesses looking to relocate or expand operations and for policymakers to evaluate their state's tax policies. KVNU News Time is 5:41.
The guys at UNI Furniture are grateful for all the snow we've been blessed with this winter, but they're ready for spring. Shop UNI's spring sale on mattresses. UNI Furniture's most talked about mattress is the copper-infused memory foam. It's by far the coolest and most responsive to touch mattress they've ever seen, and it's great for side sleepers and people with back issues. Come in for a demo. Whether it's a mattress, a full bedroom set, a comfy sectional, or just a chair, you'll always find a better buy at UNI Furniture. UNI Furniture, downtown Logan.
KVNU weather tonight, partly cloudy, patchy fog after midnight, low in the low 30s, sunny and warmer, high in the upper 50s on Wednesday. It's been into the mid 40s today. 46 has been our high. It's 45 right now at KVNU. KVNU weather brought to you by Logan Extermination. The snow is so heavy, those nasty voles had a field day in many local lawns. Make sure to call Logan Extermination to get those pesky critters under control. Call 435-752-8450. For more details on these and other stories, visit CashValleyDaily.com.
Some companies will quote you a lower price just to get you to commit to having them perform a service for you, but not John Hanson, the Duck Hunter. When you see coupons or prices advertised for services, we highly recommend you call and ask a lot of questions. Find out what other costs might be added, what type of equipment and experience they have, and what you can expect from their finished result. This tip will get you better service and a good price. For a free consultation on air duct cleaning and dryer vent line cleaning, call the Duct Hunter, 770-4813.
We are the Duck Hunter. Hey, it's Glenn Beck. Join Lyle Boss on his Safe Money radio show. He talks about how you can get substantial bonuses on your retirement accounts and so much more. You also can call Lyle right now for his new Safe Money Miracle Book and a complimentary appointment for an inflation-proof audit of your current retirement plan. Call Lyle Boss, president of Boss Financial, 855-355-SAFE. That's 855-355-7233.
Join Lyle Boss and Safe Money Radio, Saturdays at 10 a.m. on KVNU.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. I've been putting this off because it's something that is kind of personal to me, but I also feel a responsibility to do this. I had, with the news of the passing of Darla D. Clark, former Logan City mayor, as most of you know her, but also at one time disc jockey, the first full-time female disc jockey, by the way, in Utah. Back in 1968, she broke on the airwaves as Darla D, and she played rock and roll, took requests in the evenings on KBLW and later KBLQ, which you'll remember. All this, eventually became us, the Radio Ranch, as we call it, but the Cache Valley Media Group, as it's officially named now. But Darla spent 12 years on the radio before my time, and was well known throughout Cache Valley already. And then I knew her as a young child as this woman we'd occasionally run into at the Trader's Den. You might remember that, right? That store here in Logan. Darla also, by the way, owned and operated a few student housing apartments near USU, so some might know her that way. But most people listening to this show, I think, are going to remember her as Darla D. Clark, former Logan City mayor, first female mayor of Logan City, by the way. And that the race that she ran and won in, by the way, was interesting because there were a lot of female candidates in that race, which was definitely not the norm. A lot of male candidates in that race, and a female candidate was, with a choice of 8 male candidates, a female candidate was not expected to win, and she did. Her time as mayor was interesting. I always used to joke with Darla, people love to either love her or hate her when they remember her time as mayor. She was... She said herself, in her own words, that she could be hard-headed, and when she had an idea that something should work a certain way, it was going to work that way, and that made her a few enemies, she said, over the years in city government. But also, she said she left office respected and had more friends than enemies from her time as mayor. And it's sad to see her go. Darla was here on the show with us just about 6 months ago. And she was here talking to us about efforts to put together several different veterinarian services that'll be new to Cache Valley through, a county housing option there, but also working with local vets on bringing more veterinarian services, and even through Utah State University's new school funded by the legislature, and matching private donation, actually training vets that maybe we can get to stick around here in Cache Valley, veterinarians. And Darla had made that and working with the Cache Humane Society a big part of her life the last several years. She was a perpetual volunteer and philanthropist. She, in politics, was known as coming in as mayor at a time when the city was coming close, at least, to struggling to make payroll, and leaving the city 4 years later with a $26 million reserve. She did that by taking some fairly drastic measures, and thus, again, why she made a few enemies, but as she said, more friends than enemies. But I wanted to just mention this because I knew Darla from, of course, getting to interview her here on the show over the years for various things she would be involved in. And one time even she helped us do a candidate event. When one candidate was very angry with me once when I first started doing this show, because during a candidate forum I kept referring to the incumbent by their elected title, which was mayor. One of the candidates took issue with that publicly at the event. And Darla stood up to defend me and said, no, that is actually, and I knew this, but the public, the member of the public that was angry at me, or the candidate that was angry at me, didn't know that. And Darla in the audience stood up and said, no, sir, Jason is right. That is the correct decorum during a debate or a town hall for an election. You refer to the incumbent with their title because they earned it by winning the election. Just because they're running for re-election doesn't mean the title goes away. And it was instant silence. Nobody argued with Darla. So I have fond memories of her through the show, through political things we've been involved in over the years. I do remember it being at her home once, and in her office in the basement of her home, a picture of her and former President George W. Bush Jr. And she was proud of that. She was very involved in politics, but also, again, she was big on animal shelters, animal adoption services, caring for animals, and more. But this is a story that years ago, long time ago, and if you're out there, Plow King, you'll remember this story. You were there that day. So our friend Plow King, who used to run some of the high school games here with us in his evenings years ago, he called me one day and said, "I'm here installing cameras at former Logan City Mayor Darla Clark's residence in Logan, and we cannot get them to talk to the computers." And he knew I was a bit of a computer nerd. Can you help us? And so I went over. I didn't have time that day, but I went over the next day, and our good friend Plow King was outside installing cameras. I went into her office and got the computers talking to the cameras and explained what was going wrong, and then we all talked, and then finally at a certain point, and this is the story that the minute I knew it, I asked Darla if I could tell this story, and she told me, "You can tell this story when I'm dead." Those were her exact words. Because I said, "Darla, this story has to get out there. It's too funny," and she agreed. But she said, "You can tell the story when I'm dead." So here we are. So I asked, "Okay, why the security cameras?" And she said, "Well, I'm hoping to get a license plate or a car description." And I said, I hope you aren't having trouble with a home invasion or anything like that." And she said, No. If you knew Darla, and if you knew where Darla lived, Darla was a fan of filling her front yard every year with inflatables at Christmas time. Huge production in her front yard of inflatables and lights and music and everything, and the neighbors loved it. She knew it wasn't one of the neighbors doing this, but what would happen is every year, and she thought this was funny, remind you, but every year, but she wanted to catch the person still, every year someone... just after, they would always wait until after the holiday, but just after Christmas, someone would come along and basically stab one of the inflatables. They'd puncture it so it wouldn't inflate anymore. And she said it would always be, the week between Christmas and New Year's, and it would just be one. And she would fix it with duct tape or a patch kit, but she decided she was sick of this. It had happened every year for about 6 years. And I said, "Well, any potential suspects in your mind?" And she said to me, as much trouble as I stirred up as mayor, I guarantee this is a former Logan City employee, and I think I know which one. I just want it on camera. I'm not even going to take them to the police. I just want to be able to call them and say, "How childish." And then we laughed. And I begged her to let me tell that story here on the show. This was 10 years ago, and I begged her to let me tell that story. I just thought that was so funny that there might be this disgruntled former Logan City employee that maybe she had let go as mayor, who was still so mad about it that decades later they were choosing one of her inflatables to deflate every Christmas. And she said, this wasn't costing her money. She didn't feel threatened in any way. There was never a nasty note or anything like that. It was literally just one inflatable would be flat one morning shortly after the Christmas holiday. And she had a good idea that this was a former Logan City employee that maybe parted ways with the city during her administration on not so great terms. And she didn't even want to press charges. She just wanted evidence so that she could go to them and tell them they were childish. And I just thought that was the greatest story. I begged her to let me tell it on air and help them catch the culprit. And she said, no, it'll make me look petty. I don't want to talk about it. You can tell the story when I'm gone. And so with the sad news that Darla D., former and historic first full-time female disc jockey in Utah, starting in 1968, Darla D. from KBLW and KBLQ, at one time mayor of Logan City, owner and operator with her husband of the Trader's Den, an iconic spot here in Logan for years now gone. She sadly passed away. That news announced by her family last week. Passed away on April 20th. Darla Dean Merrill Clark, her full name, but we all knew her as Darla D. So, Darla, we'll miss you. We'll be back right after this.
Hey everyone, it's Kim with the Logan City Police Department. It's finally springtime and our cat chipping clinic is back. We are teaming up with the Animal Sciences of Bridgerland Technical College to host this event. It will be held Saturday, April 29th from 11 to 1 at the BTEC West building, located at 1410 North and 1000 West. Pre-registration is $10 and can be done by calling 435-716-9300. Walk-ins are also welcome for $12 per chip. Remember, all cats must be in carriers and have proof of rabies vaccination.
You think you're tired of winter. Think about your plants and trees. They've been breaking their backs all winter, literally. But don't fear.
All Tree Care is here.
Nobody is more ready for spring than these guys. In fact, now is the best time to call and have your trees and shrubs trimmed and shaped before the leaves pop out. Plus, Hull Tree Care is offering 15% off every tree trimming service. Call 760-6587. Don't wait. They get busy fast. 760-6587. Hull Tree Care. That's Hull Tree Care.
Welcome back to KVN News for the People. Bill, we're going to have to do a segment one day where I interview you. Not right now, because I know you're having some voice issues with the air and all that. But talking about Darla D and reading through her obituary here and being reminded of KBLW and KBLQ, we're going to have to sit down one day with you as a guest and just talk. Radio in Cache Valley has quite an interesting. Someone should write a book, because it's quite an interesting history. And man, just the call letters KBLQ brought back memories. I remember Saturday afternoons hauling hay, hating the heat and the sweat.
Well, and the
bugs,
the BLWs, Bridgerland West, right? That's what it stood for.
Yeah, KBLW.
Yeah.
That's just fond memories. But yeah, I remember an old pickup truck loading hay into the back, and it had one of those. Remember those AM radios that would come in these old trucks that you had to like have someone push on you to push the button to change stations.
Yeah,
it was literally you had to get a run at it to push that button in. It was one of those, and
paid for captive listening.
Yeah. You weren't. It wasn't intended to be easy and quick to change the station, but it was AM only in this old pickup truck, and we'd haul hay every Saturday, and KBLQ playing. And just, I remember hearing Al Lewis's voice for the first time. Well, not the first time in Cache Valley, but the first time for me. Same thing, out hauling hay on a Saturday afternoon with the old pickup. But, just an interesting history, and so many people like Darla D, but others who have come and gone over the years, a part of radio here in Cache Valley and, here at our studios. I don't know, I've either done this just long enough or too long, but when you get to this point where a lot of your guests have you're starting to have frequent guests who are passing away, but also former frequent guests who are now powerful politicians. We started talking to Spencer Cox when he was a House representative. And he was new, so he wanted, any microphone he could get. And then we found out we had some stuff in common with USU, and he was a good friend of the show. Now he's governor. Blake Moore as well, congressman. He first joined us here on the show years and years ago as an activist, talking about, Count My Vote and the caucus system and things like that. And, it just, this passing of Darla D brought back a lot of memories, some introspection on that part. But man, radio in Cache Valley really does have an interesting story, and I'm too lazy to do it. But if somebody out there if you're out, Al, how about that? Al Lewis, Craig Hislop, one of you guys should write the book. I volunteer him. Maybe you can talk him into it in the morning, Bill. That's Bill knows that isn't going to happen, right?
I try not to be here in the morning.
Plus, nobody talks Al Lewis into anything. But Al, if you're listening, I'd love to see someone write the book one day on the history of radio here. That's our show for today. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back tomorrow with more of For the People at 4. Dave Ramsey next here on KVNU Logan.